Hey, what's up, guys? It's MetaGamesGX here, and welcome to the top 10 budget meta Yu-Gi-Oh decks for the month of April 2025. Now, we're about to get a ban list, so things are going to change up soon here, but that's not really going to change really too much about your budget options. Now, I'm going to present to you guys the top 10 performing decks over the last month and a half, whether they are just with the rule that these decks need to be around $100, whether it is a little bit over or directly under $100. These are all decks that have either won or topped big Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments such as YCSs and regionals. So with that being said, leave a like down below. If you guys want to see another video like this next month, we will do that if this video gets to 200 likes. Also, leave a comment down below what your favorite deck was that I went over for this video, and let me know if I missed anything. So let's get right into number 10. We have Melodious, the tried and true fusion strategy that has been recently boosted in the last couple years. And you still see this deck, since Herman Hansen was running it, winning his nationals with it. You still see this deck do well, whether it is in TCG and or Master Duel, because it is a deck that can run so much non-engine. You see this in this build, you get to run Herald of the Orange Light, which is just Gamma, but you can use it with any of your fairy monsters, and it's not once per turn, and you don't have to run a brick. It's really crazy card. And then also you have so much other room, so you can just chock full this list full of hand traps, such as this pilot did for their top 8 at the Leighton WCQ. And you also have really powerful board breaking in the form of Ostinato, which is your own in-engine branded fusion that's not once per turn, which is just crazy. And then also you can end on very unbreakable boards that are very competent into things like Malice and Ryzeal, especially Ryzeal, because Ryzeal they really target, but this card called Area the Melodious Diva says your opponent cannot destroy or target your Melodious monsters with card effects, basically. So it's very broken once you get an area into rotation to shut down your opponent with. This card is absolutely nuts and is one of the reasons why this deck does so well in this current format, I think. Also, Flowering Etoile is a very competent boss monster that allows you to bounce you and your opponent's monsters, so you can do really skillful things with that. At number 9, we have a top 4 from the UK Open with Purrely. Purrely is one of those decks that continues to still stand tall, even despite a bunch of hits to the deck. And this deck actually still ends up being a great engine to put a ton of non-engine into, while having a great end board and ability to board break in the Purrely cards. Now, I think they have been power crept a little bit, but with potential support on the horizon and this deck still claiming top 4 spots at huge tournaments like this UK Open, I think this is definitely a deck that you still have to know what it does, and you should consider if you're looking for a budget option, because this list clocking in at around $100 really does do the trick, in my opinion. If you're looking for a competent Purrely deck for this format, you're running the Ultimate Slayers, which allow you to just clear through the Ryzeal board and turn off that Ryzeal cross by returning the Ryzeal detonator, which is very devastating and can just one-shot the board. But you're also running tech cards like Metal Foes Fusion, and then the Black Goat Laughs, and then also your Brow engine, so that you have a very good and competent discard engine for all of your purely quick play spells, which require you to eventually discard a card to use. So I think that's very smart, because Malphos will give you the draw, and then Blacko helps you go second, and obviously these do too. So the Triple Tactics Talents too, this has always been a good deck with board breakers, and board breakers are very good this format. I think the Dark Ruler is kind of spicy and maybe better into the future, but with a deck they can make an unaffected boss monster that has quick effect bounces and X Purely Noir. I think this deck is still something that is very good. It has a win con. It just has a bit of issue in time, so you always have to have like time cards. That's why you see Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood in a lot of these lists. But with that being said, I think Purrely will treat you right if you learn it. It's definitely one of those decks that you have to learn how to sequence well to effectively pilot the deck. Next, you have Ritual Beast, which is a very competent combo deck that I've featured a couple times on this video series, but you know, it continues in my opinion to be one of the better budget options in the game right now that, you know, can still always just cost you about $100 to make a deck that can run the most powerful hand trap in the game, Dimensional Shifter, on top of just having, you know, end board pieces that are really broken, like Thunder Dragon Colossus if you choose to run it, or like this build is doing, the Arch Nemesis Protos, which gets to lock your opponent out of using like either lights or fires, so it's pretty good against a lot of the meta in that case. And you get to run a lot of non-engine too, so this is one of those decks that continues to just like put up numbers. It's not like as good as it was when it first came out, but you know, I think, you know, if it goes first uninterrupted, you're basically winning the game most of the time, especially if you're running things like Steeds and make the ulti Gaia Pelio line. So, you know, I'd learn the lines and get good with this deck if this is something that interests you. So next we have Mimighoul on our list, because Mimighoul recently got a top 8 finish, maybe even top 4 finish at the Buenos Aires YCS that just happened over the last weekend, and we still don't have the list, but we do have quite a few lists from times past that have top like regionals that I can show off right here, that I think like shows that the deck can still compete very much so in this meta. It's still a very competent deck. Like, even though Dominus Impulse is in the meta, it's not in every deck. It's only really in Malice at the moment, besides Mermal. So it's one of those things where you can still get away with running this deck. And just like that pilot, he ended up topping a YCS with the deck, which really does show like the power of the deck. And we don't know the list, but I'm sure it's somewhat similar. You can't really get too much more spicy outside of a Mimighoul list. So with that being said, it's just, you know, a modern flip strategy that can make a very competent end board that can floodgate out your opponent with things like Mimighoul Fairy, which is interesting. This build is running 3 of them. I remember people thought this was not going to be a 3 of, but this card is just so broken, so I can understand why they are doing that. And you can still run a lot of non-engine, including Dimensional Shifter, which gives you a great going second when you do see that non-engine. Next, we have Dinomorphia. So Dinomorphia is a deck I've covered on these lists before, but it is, I keep seeing it pop up, whether it's at YCS's, regionals, and it's just one of those decks that can still punch through the meta pretty okay because of the fact that you can run just a very extraordinary amount of traps that just blow out your opponent, whether it's, you know, your Dinomorphia domain and Frenzy that gets you out to your Rex Term, which is basically a walking, talking floodgate. But then you are also backed up with blowouts like the Solemn Brigade, and then also Ferret Flames and things like Trap Trick and Iron Thunder. So this deck can actually really just put a walloping on your opponent if it's able to go first, and you know, your opponent doesn't have anything in the main deck to destroy spells and traps, which people really aren't running at the moment. So, you know, I think this has a great just like kind of meta call vibe to it as long as the current meta stays. Next, you have Stun. Of course, there's different types of stuns: Dogmatic Stun, Runick Stun. This is going to be a Runick Stun build that we saw recently top a Mendoza, or got top 8 at Mendoza Regional. And you love to see Runick still be on the radar, even with, you know, Detonator being in the format, which really does invalidate the Runick cards. But, you know, this build is able to set up really incredible plays with the Runick Fountain engine so that you're able to draw 3 every turn while stopping your opponent from playing the game with things like Inspector Border and also Dimension Fissure. Since you're always just drawing into cards, you're probably just going to see that one of Time Tearing Morganite, which is kind of interesting, with 1 Desires. Really interesting ratios in this list. You're also able to run like all the good floodgates in the game. This build is choosing not to use Synchro Zone, which is fine. I mean, your win con with this build is to deck out your opponent, so you could definitely, you know, change up things. And this is a $32 build. This is maybe the cheapest deck we've ever had on our budget series, which is crazy to say. And this build got top 8, so this shows you that you can play Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like, you can play cheap Yu-Gi-Oh. It's just like you have to play the builds that actually like lend to it, just like Runick Stun. It's also running the Spooky Dogwood for time. And then also, it does have lots of just fun extra deck options. So if you're looking for something that says it's going to say no to your opponent, this is the perfect deck for you, while not breaking the bank, of course. Next, we have Blue Eyes on our list, which was our first place last month, but I do want to acknowledge that the budget Blue Eyes version is not quite as good. We did have Blue Eyes at the top of our top budget list last month, and why is it a couple spots above this month? Well, I think there's just better options if you don't have the Primite cards, but I still think this is an incredible option. $53. This is going to be the best, cheapest deck, I think. This is better than the Runick deck, I think. If you want just like a deck that plays normal Yu-Gi-Oh, but also it's $53, guys. You literally just buy this guy bought 3 structure decks, put in 3 I think this card comes with it, and literally just topped his regional. It was really cool to see that. You know, running 2 seals, 3 spirit, 3 tyrant dragon. Yep. Oh my gosh, he actually just bought 3 structure decks and put in some seals essentially into triple tactics talents, which shows you guys that Blue Eyes is very competent. Once again, there are so many good budget options for Yu-Gi-Oh right now. I don't think that price being a factor in Yu-Gi-Oh is quite a thing at the moment. Yes, Fuwalos isn't reprinted. It's about to be, you know, so lots of those expensive cards are going to get really not expensive pretty soon here. And Blue Eyes just shows you guys how you can make a very good synchro end board with, you know, things like seals, of course, because this build gets to make things like double spirit dragon with seals with a bunch of hand traps on the backup. Plus you have Majesty of White Dragon to pop multiple cards on your opponent's turn. So I think, you know, with the amount of non-engine you get to main, this is probably one of easily the best decks on this list that you should consider for bringing in to a tournament as a budget option. $53, you can't beat that. All right, next we have Fire King. So this could obviously be like interchangeable, I think, with Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes is technically just a better budget deck, but this is also this deck has more tops for the budget version. So this is kind of like Dinkabooey's list essentially, where you run like 3 Pot of Extravagance plus a bunch of hand traps, and you get to basically play the Fire King mini game on top of just not non-engineing your opponent to death. And it's very good still. You have things like Fire King Skyburner, which really does allow this deck to have a very competent end board on top of the Fire King Sanctuary, which allows you to then convert your level 8 bodies that, you know, are popping cards on your opponent's turn in the form of Kieran, just one of the best cards in the game, just for an in-engine, just pop while also extending your deck. It's just great. Also, I think that Garunix, once again, going in off of the Fire King Sanctuary once you overlay your level 8s on your opponent's turn to destroy all of your opponent's monsters, is a very devastating play that your opponent can't quite play around a lot of the time. And at about $100, you know, this deck is very good and has multiple YCS and regional tops behind it on this kind of build, so I think that's very good. And it's probably the best Promethean Princess deck also, which is still just a utterly busted card. And, you know, it has a pretty good matchup into the meta right now because most people are on things like Metaltronus. So those things in Ultimate Slayer, which doesn't really line up into this build. So, you know, you're already getting kind of just like a good meta call in this deck, but also just a very competent and tried and true deck. All right, so now we have branded Despia. We have this new list from another list from the late in WCQ. Oscar, we had him actually on the stream for a second. I reacted to his deck profile, very good deck profile. And this is a budget list by any standard. This is a $214 list, but if you remove 3 Mulcharmy Purrelyas, which are about $25 each, this deck's price goes way down and goes to a little over $100. And obviously you could just remove a talents and you basically get to the $100 mark. So I really do like this build. It is all the branded cards are very cheap, and branded, you guys know I'm a branded guy, so I'm a little biased here, but I think that going first and going second, the deck just does absolutely everything. You know, you're able to run some hand traps in the form of Droll and Lockbird like you did as a budget alternative to not having Mulcharmy, but you also just get to run a bunch of board breakers that just blow out your opponent in the form of Super Poly, which is great against Malice, and then Talents and Thrust, which is incredible into the Ryzeal board to hopefully out the Detonator and the Cross. And this deck has a struggle into Abyss Dweller, yes, but with Dweller looking to be banned on the next list, I think, with Branded's multiple regional tops and YCS top and a UK Open third place, you know, this deck's looking very good into this format and the upcoming format. Even with Droll, I mean, you get to run Allura Darkness, and this deck has so many bangers and ways to play around Droll that it doesn't even really matter. It has so many ways to play around Mulcharmy. It has the best Mulcharmy line in the game because you just send Ido and make Sanctifier and you lock your opponent and make a Mirror Jade. It's very free. So you know, if you're not coming prepared for branded, you're going to lose to it. And it's also just one of those decks, in my opinion, that is just like on the same axis as Mimighoul, where if it goes first, it basically wins the game. No, Mirror Jade is still one of the best boss monsters in the whole game that a lot of decks just don't have an out to. So branded just has so many pluses to running it in this kind of format, where a lot of the non-engine just does not once again line up into this deck. So if you end up going against Ryzeal and Malice, they're going to be main decking Maltronus and Ultimate Slayer for your deck, and they're going to be completely bricks for you. So at number 1, I wanted to give something different a try. We have Crystron. We got 3 different lists of Crystron right here that have all topped, you know, regionals and YCSs, and they're all below $130, which I really do like. This was a Cashier Crystron list, which also obviously runs the Cashier cards, but then also has the Crystron engine to make a very good end board and push the deck over with, you know, things like the Cashier cards, which definitely helps with OTKing and just layering your end board under hand traps, because a lot of the time you can just end on like a Cashier card plus the Tristaros, which, you know, still is a pretty good end board, honestly. So yeah, this is just like a deck that has very good lines under a lot of hand traps. It can get randomly like one-shotted to droll if you get drolled on like the Smiger, but like outside of that, it has like a really good ability to play through hand traps because of things like Tristaros. And with Dweller and Shifter being really big impediments for this deck, I think it's really kept the deck back this format. But when those things aren't holding the deck back, it's able to just cut through the meta. You know, it's very competent. It's a very good combo deck, but also can play very mid-range, which is good, I think. And then also, it's a water deck, so it doesn't just, like, lose to Bestials. And once again, it doesn't just, like, lose to, you know, a lot of the non-engine going around. So, you know, in the future with, like, Abyss Dweller getting possibly banned, I think this deck's looking to be very good. And also, it just has multiple tops. It just got a top at the YCS Buenos Aires, and then also has multiple tops, whether it's, you know, YCS tops or regional tops. So I do think that, and this is a 60-card list, Adventure Crystron for $150, so a little bit more expensive, but you get to run the Adventure engine, plus Grass Looks Greener, which is really cool in my opinion. That's really unique, honestly. And then also you do have just the regular pure Crystron list that you can run here for like exactly $100 with title, and then like Speedroid Terratop, so you can have like a nib out in the form of Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, which is something I've been kind of curious why more people aren't running this in other decks, because Terratop's literally just a free nib out. So I think when Fiendsmith gets banned, we might see this become more of an engine in decks. But with that being said, yeah, what was your favorite deck that we went over? I think Crystron, you know, branded, I think Blue Eyes, Fire King are all decks that you should really be considering. I think every deck on this list, though, are topping regional and YCSs. So, like, you know, pick the one that you feel like you'll have the most fun with and you'll do the best with. And at the end of the day, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Check out my website if you want to pick up my branded spreadsheet, and then also some cool merch. Also, subscribe if you haven't already. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers. Thank you for 10,000 already. And then also follow me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe to my second YouTube channel if you'd like to see bonus videos. All the links for all of these things are down in the description. You could also use my TCG Player affiliate link if you'd like to make some purchases on my TCG Player to help support the channel. With that being said, we will be seeing you guys later. Bye now.